What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video I'm going to be going through some of the biggest risers and fallers after week 2 of the NFL preseason. So we got some more information, we got to see some teams go out there, play with their starters. Even the teams that didn't play their number ones, we can still get some information about potential sleepers, running back twos, handcuffs. So talking about, I think, 17 specific players in this video. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. But let's just dive into it, and I want to start off by talking about the wide receiver duo from the Chiefs, Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. These are both guys that I've been moving up my rankings pretty consistently here. Heading into the preseason, Rice, Worthy, Marquise Brown, they were all kind of in the same range for me as like back-end wide receiver threes. But I feel like the injury to Hollywood Brown has really allowed both these guys to kind of lock down their starting spots and really just kind of secure their role within this offense, because Hollywood Brown, he has more experience than both of these guys. You could see him coming in, having that starting role. Maybe it's Xavier Worthy who has to kind of work his way in, only playing 3 wide receiver sets. But as of right now, both these dudes in their time with the starters had a 93% route participation. They were also getting heavily targeted. Rashee Rice, 5 targets on 14 Patrick Mahomes pass attempts. Xavier Worthy, 4 targets on those 14 pass attempts. Rashee Rice, the big concern for him heading into the season was whether or not he was going to get hit with a suspension. It hasn't come yet, and if I had to bet, I'd say it's probably not going to happen this season, which really just opens things up for him. And then for Xavier Worthy, the fact that he has such a large role so early on is very encouraging. We saw Rashee Rice really tear it up to end the season last year, but he didn't get like a full-time starter's usage until like after week 10. It took him over half the season to kind of work his way into this offense. It looks like Xavier Worthy is going to be a week 1 starter, so I've bumped these guys up to wide receiver 28 and wide receiver 29 in my personal rankings, and I do think both these dudes are going to ball out this year. Now, the next pairing of wide receivers I want to talk about here comes from the Chicago Bears, and I'm at a point where I'm starting to move Odunze up, and I'm starting to drop Keenan Allen down. And honestly, this specific game, the usage didn't really like sway my mind a ton. Like, it's not like Odunze saw a huge increase in his usage. He was still only in there on 3 wide receiver sets. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen were the dudes in there on 12 personnel. But Odunze, I feel like I've just come to the conclusion that he is going to be a playmaker on this team. Had a 45-yard reception. They also got him involved on the ground. He had a 16-yard rush. I feel like it's only a matter of time before Odunze eventually beats out Keenan Allen for, those wide receiver 2 snaps. Keenan Allen's 32 years old. He's had some injury concerns over the past couple of seasons. He also has not gotten the best reports this offseason. There's been stuff about him potentially coming in overweight. And while I'm not just going to tank him because of, a couple reports here and there also hasn't been much positivity. He's not extended, past this season with the Bears, and he's no longer in a situation where a guy like Justin Herbert is going to have to force feed him because there's no competition. DJ Moore's legit. Odunze is a great prospect, a top 10 pick, so I've bumped Odunze up to my wide receiver 35. I think if you're able to draft him anywhere outside like the top 36, if you're drafting him as a wide receiver 4, I think he's going to end up being a steal here. So Odunze moving up for me, Keenan Allen starting to slip a little bit. I want to talk about one of my favorite players, a guy I've been starting to move down a little bit. It's going to be Dell. And like I said, I've been very high on him. So me kind of moving him down here, probably at worst, is going to have me like right in line with consensus. I'm probably still a little bit higher than consensus. I have him as my wide receiver 23, but he was once again only in on 3 wide receiver sets. It was the same thing in week 1. I think there was only 4 routes run, total, but he was in on 3 of them, had a 75% route participation. This weekend, his route participation was down at 60%. Now, I don't think it's going to be 60% over the entire season. That could definitely fluctuate. I believe it was only 10 dropbacks, but it's not ideal, right? You want them either to run just a ton of 3 wide receiver sets, or you want Tank Dell to, at the very least, be like mixing in with Stephon Diggs there. Now, I'm still a big believer in Tank Dell. I think he's very talented, and I think he could end up working his way into splitting those routes with Diggs, or just going, super heavy in terms of 11 personnel. But right now, just the fact that he is pretty clearly behind Diggs in snaps, I did have to drop him below Stephon Diggs. I'd been holding on for a while, but that is a move I made. Still very high on him, still very high on this offense, but did have to drop him down below Stephon Diggs. And then another young wide receiver here, Malik Nabers. This isn't really a situation where I'm moving him up or down, but I do just kind of want to talk about him here because there's been a lot of discussion, especially after the preseason game, talking about Malik Nabers and Daniel Jones not really being able to support him because Daniel Jones went out. He was pretty awful in the first half, threw 2 bad picks. It was just not a great game out of Daniel Jones. And I've seen a lot of people kind of spin that into, all right, Malik Nabers is going to be stuck in like a Garrett Wilson situation with terrible quarterback play. The talent's not going to matter, because he's not going to have someone to support him. And I'm not coming out here arguing that Malik Nabers is in a great situation. He's definitely not. It's a poor situation. If he was in a, comparable spot to a Marvin Harrison Jr., I would have those dudes ranked back to back. That's how talented I think Malik Nabers is. But I also don't think this is such an awful situation where it's just removing any ceiling, any upside. Like I said, it's been compared to Garrett Wilson from last year and I guess his rookie year. I don't think it's the same thing. I know Daniel Jones is not good, but Daniel Jones is better than what we were getting out of Zach Wilson. And I think more importantly, he has Brian Daboll there, Malik Nabers does, compared to Nathaniel Hackett. I'm confident that Brian Daboll is going to work this out for Malik Nabers. I don't think the quarterback play has to be elite. I think he's going to get put in positions to succeed. And I think people are forgetting, they're kind of burying him after like this one half with Daniel Jones. In that half, he still caught 4 passes for 54 yards. So he was still pacing for a really nice game, even with Daniel Jones struggling. So this isn't a situation where like I'm moving him up or down. I'm holding him steady as my wide receiver 17. But if you can capitalize on other people panicking and starting to, pivot off of him, move him down in their rankings, then I definitely would because I still, think he's a great option this year. Then another rookie wide receiver here, Keon Coleman. He's someone that I'm moving up, and it hasn't necessarily been because of his actual play in the preseason games, but it has been with his usage. In the first 2 preseason games for the Bills, Keon Coleman has run a route on every single drop back with the ones. He has had an 100% route participation in both games with the starters. So I think week 1 it was Josh Allen. I think this past week it was Mitch Trubisky. And there has been some like weird stuff with the wide receivers where the Bills were without Matt Collins week 1, and then they were without Curtis Samuel this weekend. But the fact that Keon Coleman has led in routes in both weeks has to be a good sign. Now, this doesn't mean that Keon Coleman, if he has this usage, is going to be amazing. You still have to be talented to actually go out and produce, right? We saw a situation last year where Quentin Johnston was getting solid routes on a good offense with a good quarterback. But if you are not a good NFL wide receiver, the production's not going to come. So the jury's still out on that in terms of Keon Coleman, his ability, his talent. But the opportunity is going to be there, and if you can be the potential wide receiver 1 on a Josh Allen-led offense, the ceiling is going to be pretty high if you do hit as a player. So I have bumped Keon Coleman up a few spots after these first 2 preseason games. Now another rookie here that I'm actually starting to move down a little bit, it is going to be Ladd McConkey. And the Chargers did not play Justin Herbert in week 2, but they did play their starting wide receivers. And Ladd McConkey did not see a single snap in 2 wide receiver sets. That is not an ideal situation for a guy that I was interested in due to the potential volume. Thought he'd be their wide receiver 1, out of the slot, just commanding a ton of targets from Justin Herbert. And if he's not in there on 2 wide receiver sets, that is not a good start here. I'm still willing to draft him as like a wide receiver 4, mid to high end wide receiver 4 option, but I am going to be tempering expectations early on in the season because the usage, not great in week 2. And if you guys are wondering where I'm getting all this snap information from, Nathan, I think it's Jonke from PFF, he does a great job getting that information out there. He has articles for each week. I think if you look up like PFF week 1 fantasy takeaways or something, it'll come up. You can see the snap counts. That's where I'm kind of getting these conclusions from. But do check him out because he does great work. But now shifting over to Zamir White, he's someone that I'm slowly moving down a little bit. He's been a player that's been pretty interesting to kind of evaluate throughout this offseason. He has a lot of dead zone running back characteristics, but it also seemed like he had legit workhorse upside. So the usage we saw this weekend was not great. He had a 78% snap share week 1, 70% in week 2. That was like with the ones. And it looks like Madison is the clear running back 2 at this point. Zamir White also played into the second half of that preseason game, which It's kind of rare for like a clear starting running back. You typically don't see those dudes actually play into the second half. You also have Dylan Laube, who could potentially become a factor here. I just think the usage we've seen hasn't been as dominantly favoring Zamir White as we would have liked. And if this is like a real split where you have Madison or Laube kind of coming in on third downs and Zamir White isn't just completely dominating this backfield, then it's definitely far less appealing, because then you're looking at like an early down grinder on a not great offense that's probably not going to score a ton of points. So it kind of, in my opinion, takes him out of like that top 24 area. So I still have him as a high-end running back 3. The usage just hasn't been as locked in as I was kind of hoping for. And then another running back here, but a guy going in a different direction, Devin Singletary. I think most of us assumed that he'd be lined up to be the lead back, but it definitely seems like we got confirmation of that this weekend. He had an 88% snap share, 79% raw participation, 10 carries, 1 target in the first half. He was super inefficient with those opportunities. I think it was like 10 carries for 20 yards, which isn't great, but it's good to see that the usage is there. And then also Tyrone Tracy seemed like the guy who could potentially challenge him for usage, but he messed up his ankle, dealing with that right now. So rookie, injured heading into the season. I think Devin Singletary is going to have a good shot, to take control of this backfield and be the lead back. Now, I want to shift over to talking about some depth running backs, some younger RBs, rookies, I think 1 second-year guy, guys who could be potential handcuffs and nice late-round targets. So I want to start off by talking about Ray Davis. At this point, he is one of my favorite handcuffs. It seems like he's come in, established himself as the running back 2. He came in after James Cook with the starters in week 1. Week 2, 8 carries for 58 yards. He's been impressive. Has an interesting skill set because he's a little bit of a bigger running back. Not huge. I think he's like 5'8", 210, but he is someone you can get in there on the goal line. We know the Bills don't like to use James Cook, right on the goal line, so Ray Davis could filter in there, and then also has that handcuff upside if James Cook were to go down. Another one of these rookies, Braylon Allen, he was someone that was looking like the clear running back 2 after week 1, but now Isaiah Davis has kind of started to work his way in here. They split the first half usage, 16 snaps for Braylon Allen, 13 for Isaiah Davis. Braylon Allen did out-touch Davis with 8 carries, 4 targets, to 4 carries and 1 target for Isaiah Davis. And I do think that Braylon Allen is definitely still the guy to draft behind Brees, but I don't think it's as clear of a handcuff situation as maybe we thought after week 1. Trey Benson is a guy who had a nice bounce back game, 9 carries for 43 yards, really struggled in the first preseason game, but I still feel like he's being a little bit overdrafted. Like in his current ADP, it is already baked in that like he has a shot to potentially work his way into a committee or potentially like take over this backfield towards the end of the season. And I just don't know if that's super likely at this point. Like he has handcuff upside, I guess, but I still don't think it's like as clear as some of these other options. You still have Michael Carter, DeMercado, who are like in the mix. So even if James Conner were to go down, I still don't think Trey Benson steps up and operates as like the clear-cut running back 1. So I think a little bit better than how we were feeling after last week, but still not all the way back in on him. Then we have Bucky Irving, and I'm very in on Bucky Irving right now. He played the first 12 snaps, then was done for the day. It wasn't the starters, but he was like operating as like the running back 1 for the second unit. So he already has that handcuff upside as the running back 2, but I also think he has legit opportunity to cut into Rashad White's usage. Rashad White was not efficient last year. Bucky Irving isn't like a significantly worse prospect. Like he's a little bit undersized, didn't have great athletic testing, but he was a solid runner in college. Rashad White, round 3 pick. Bucky Irving, round 4 pick. I just think he could find a way to work his way into this offense and definitely draftable at worst as like a handcuff. Then the 1 second-year guy that I mentioned is Tank Bigsby, and he is coming off a very rough 2023. I was really high on Tank Bigsby heading into last year. I thought he could start to try to force a committee. I feel like that's almost like what the Jaguars wanted, but he was just so unbelievably bad that they couldn't do it. But it looks like he has reestablished himself as their running back 2. Definitely dominated Dearness Johnson in terms of the usage. So I think he's a nice handcuff here and someone that's probably going to go undrafted in most leagues. But if you're in a deep bench, I think Tank Bigsby, definitely someone who could be a nice handcuff option for you. And then the final rookie running back here, Kamani Vidal. He had a lot of fantasy hype after the draft. Day 3 pick going to the Chargers, but a wide open running back room. This was an expected run-heavy team. Like I said, weak competition, but the reports out of Chargers camp had not been positive. Some even suggested that he wouldn't even make the final roster here. But this weekend, both J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards did not play. You had Vidal, Spiller, Patterson, and Dotson all kind of mixing in here. They all got their own looks, but Vidal definitely made the most of his opportunities. 11 carries, 49 yards, 2 receptions for 8 yards. So I don't think all hope is lost here. I'd probably lean towards him making the team at this point. And even though it doesn't seem great, do we really want to draft someone who's barely making a roster? Gus Edwards at this point in his career and J.K. Dobbins coming off a torn Achilles, it is not crazy competition here. So it's still not impossible that Vidal ends up finding a role within this offense. And then I believe the last player I want to talk about here, Jordan Whittington, from the Los Angeles Rams. He is a 6th-round rookie who has come in and made quite an impact through 2 preseason games. In the first week, he caught 6 passes for 74 yards. Week 2, 5 receptions for 52 yards. Now, there's no guarantee he sees really any usage in the regular season. Obviously, you have Puka Nacua, you have Cooper Kupp, you have Demarcus Robinson there, who should be their wide receiver 3. But Cooper Kupp is coming off an injury-riddled season. We also saw the Rams just turn a day 3 pick in Puka Nacua into a fantasy wide receiver 1. So I'm not saying that's going to be Jordan Whittington this season. He's probably not someone who's even draftable, but just someone who's, kind of made a name for himself here and just someone to keep an eye on. Not saying you have to go out draft him with your last pick, but maybe we take a look at the usage after week 1, just kind of monitor if he's starting to work his way into this offense. Pretty deep sleeper here with Whittington. But that is going to wrap it up for this one. Biggest risers, biggest fallers. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you did enjoy the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.